February's winter storm knocked out power, leaving millions of Texans in the dark without heat. But for most people in Lubbock, the power stayed on. Their city had its own power system. The grid that failed was controlled by ERCOT, the Electric Reliability Council of Texas. Well before the storm, Lubbock reached a deal to move its electric customers to the ERCOT grid. The change is scheduled to happen this weekend. But the problems during the storm have worried people, and not just in Lubbock. One big question, can the system handle adding more homes? Wes Rapaport asked ERCOT leadership and Texas lawmakers whether the state is ready.
Inside the ERCOT control room, the team prepares to add thousands of new customers from Lubbock, with the plan nearly a decade in the making finally coming to fruition.
There's an enormous amount of engineering work underway. There are new transmission lines that have been constructed in order to reliably serve the citizens of the city of Lubbock that are moving over into the ERCOT region.
ERCOT's Senior Director of System Planning says the new deal will also bring more generation power from the South Plains and the Panhandle, now painting a rosy picture after the February fiasco.
The new transmission assets are going to be increasing reliability, not just in the region, but also increasing reliability throughout the grid. I don't think there are any specific concerns at all.
Some lawmakers see it the same way. State Rep John Frullo says he's hopeful Lubbock customers won't see a real change.
When we turn that light switch on, we want power, and we want to be able to afford that bill.
At the federal level, Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg told me the infrastructure failures showed a need for reform.
We need to recognize that our power infrastructure is critical infrastructure and needs to have real, serious, major federal investment.
One future fear for customers floats to the surface because in the winter storm, Lubbock's power largely stayed on. It's currently on a different system.
What is the biggest worry that you have about this transition process?
Well, my biggest concern is we don't want people to die when their power doesn't go out. And people die from excessive heat, and they die from excessive cold.
Lubbock's state senator, Republican Charles Perry, tells me legislative proposals this session to reform the grid in light of the February freeze will bring reliability back to the Electric Reliability Council of Texas.
We will have done the things regulatory-wise that will hopefully open up the opportunities to do what needs to be done to not guarantee, but minimize the disruptions going forward.
ERCOT says the winter storm had little to no effect on the planning for this transition. ERCOT tells me they are working on trying to regain public trust after the near collapse of the electric grid. At the Texas Capitol, I'm Wes Rapaport for State of Texas.
Energy failures in Texas during the freeze also grabbed the attention of policymakers in Washington. Wes spoke with U.S. Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm about the potential federal role in fixing the problems.
The Texas legislature is addressing different changes to improve the state's power grid in light of the winter storm that we faced. What should the focus be in your mind as Texas works to find a fix for that?
Well, clearly there needs to be winterizing of the system. This was raised, almost a decade ago, and in a similar situation. And because these storms are getting more and more frequent, these freak weather events are happening, it would behoove, I think, everybody to consider, and I'm sure they are, making sure that it is weatherized. There's one other thing that would be worth considering, I think, at least in some kind of way, and I understand the importance to Texas of the grid being independent from the federal system. But there are times when it would be, I think, to Texas's best interest to be able to accept help from a neighbor, us to be able to send electricity across the transmission grid. And honestly, for Texas, given the unbelievable amount of resources that Texas has in renewable energy, wind and solar, I mean, y'all are amazing in that. But to be able to export that might be able to be economically advantageous to Texas as well.
What lessons, going back to this February freeze, what lessons did this freeze teach you at the Department of Energy and your team?
Well, I think one of the most important things is that we have to, not just in Texas, but everywhere, invest in the grid. We have to invest in making sure that we've got a grid that can sustain these weather events. Maybe that means in some cases undergrounding the wires to make them able to withstand some of these weather events. In some cases, that means ensure that there is weatherization on the grid. In some cases, we also had this hack called solar winds. So in some cases, in all cases, it means that we have to be resilient from hackers. So all of those are all pieces of the lessons. We are seeing these infrastructure meltdowns across the country, whether it's in transmission or in roads and bridges. It's one of the reasons, again, why the administration is so focused on getting an infrastructure package in a bipartisan way through Congress, and hopeful that we'll be able to get there and announce something very soon.
Thank you again for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Josh Hinkle. We'll be back next week to bring you an in-depth look at Texas politics. Have a great day.